Hello everyone, James Donaldson here with The Contemporary Gentleman, and I'm bringing you a video on how to handle your weapon. You've seen some of my other videos that cover safety, how weapons function, as pistols primarily, and of course how to buy a gun. Now let's say you've bought a gun and you have it home. How are you going to use it within the confines of your home? Well, let's talk about those things. Alright everyone, moving straight into the meat and potatoes, let's talk about handling your firearm. Well, the main reasons you want to do it are because, one, you want to ingrain safety into your head. You want to make it second nature. Of course, you also want the way you manipulate your gun to be second nature. So, double action, safety on, double action, safety off. Single action, safety off, single action, safety on, fire. Double action, fire, safety on, etc. So, having those things in your head, along with the safety aspects, which I'll touch again on here in a moment, are going to be very important. You basically, some people see that in when they go to hold power drills or Windex bottles, other spray bottles, their fingers off basically what is the trigger, because their safety protocols are so ingrained in their head. Something I'm going to hit on a lot in this video: protocols and procedures, and of course redundancy. Now, getting straight into safety, I have a whole video on it, so I'm just going to touch on it. A lot of people complicate it, even with 4 steps. No, way too many. Here at The Contemporary Gentleman, we're about 2.5 steps for safety. So 1, point the weapon in a safe direction. 2, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to pull it. And half, do those things all the time. Couldn't be any easier than that, right? That applies to every single gun, whether the gun is a safety or not, no matter if it has laser sights or whatever crazy thing going on, rocket launchers, that apply. Those safety rules apply. Now, moving on to the next part, getting the gun out. So typically, as I recommend, you're going to store your firearm one of 2 ways. Either, as I recommend, loaded magazine with a loaded chamber as well, if it's a defensive gun, meaning it's in a place where it is intended to be used in a defensive situation. If it's not, so say hunting rifle or hunting shotgun or just an AR that isn't a defensive AR, or pistol is not a defensive pistol, I recommend storing it empty. Empty magazine or no magazine at all. Of course, making sure the chamber is empty before you put it away. But of course, because you treat every gun like it's loaded at all times, when you get the gun out, you're going to check to make sure that the gun isn't loaded. You'll notice I'm pulling the magazine out because you don't want the magazine loaded and you go check it. Oh, it's empty, and then load a round in. I do have a whole video on pistol functions. Check it out if you're not following me. So, empty magazine, empty chamber, ready to go, ready to handle my gun. Next, you want to go to a safe place, controlled area, and of course you want to do this in opportune time, so probably when people are going to leave you alone. I often do this when children are asleep and my wife is content doing her own thing. As far as a place, if I'm not home alone, the place is usually the laundry room because my wife can't hear my clicking noises that annoy her. So, happy wife, happy life. Anyway, so, controlled area. Now, you don't want ammo in this area, or at least I highly recommend you don't. This is a safety redundancy, because during your dry fire practice, which dry fire is firing the gun with nothing in it, during your dry fire practice, you're still going to be doing your checks and all that, but having the ammo away is going to add to that peace of mind. So, next is your movements. So first of all, let's talk about how you're gripping the gun in the first place. So, physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Bullet is in here, when the trigger is pulled, the bullet is going to fire out. Well, the force is going to propel the slide back and the gun back in general. So, If the gun is floating in space, the gun is going to move back. Granted, with this weight, it's going to kind of move back like that. But you're putting your hand there, it's going to move back like that all the more. Ideally, you could put your hand here and prevent the force directly, but you can't do that because the slide has to move backwards to eject the spent shell casing and load another round. Again, check out my video on how pistols function, mini pistols function. So you're going to choke up your hand as much as you can without letting the slide cut you, which most guns have this nice kind of beaver tail deal here. So, and of course you're going to grip it well with your fingers, you know, leverage. Leverage is going to be mentioned a lot in this video. So now, with recoil, if you're one-handed, the gun is going to want to come up this way because your hand is open along here. So what do? Take your other hand, your thumb, through the meaty part of your palm, and you place it right there. Now, you got a good grip. So, let's talk about what you're doing next. So your draw, presentation, it's called a lot of things. It's basically where your gun comes from, wherever it is resting, whether it's in your hand or in a holster, and then it is on its intended target, your intended target. So, I start, for beginners, I start them out right about here. My gun is aimed at what I'm going to be aiming at because that's how you would square off. If I'm squaring off with you, I'm going to have the gun aimed at you like this, ideally. Because the gun is in, I'm in control of it. If we're talking more close quarters, someone's close enough, I don't need to make a big deal of aiming. I can just have the gun go off and I'm going to hit my target. So, self-defense scenario, person's that close. This is a okay way to be firing your weapon. You get to here by coming out from drawing your weapon. My mentality is I want the gun ready to fire before me. I want the gun waiting on me. I'm the human, I'm the weak part of this whole thing. I want it waiting on me, I don't want to be waiting on the gun to save my life. So, when drawing from the appendix, snapping it out, and of course a side draw, bringing it up immediately, and then bringing it out. This is kind of the end game. So, we're cutting it into two pieces. For beginners, we're starting down here. Now, how this is going to go is fingers off the trigger, and then depending on what we're doing, we bring it up. Our fingers either coming onto the trigger, taking up that slack so that when we're here, pull the trigger, or practicing bringing it up. That was bad. Bring it up, and then put our finger on the trigger. A little bit of movement, that's what you're practicing. Try to get rid of that movement. So, I do recommend practicing some of these things different ways because you aren't always going to be able to dictate what's going on. Sometimes someone else is making decisions when it comes to you defending yourself, like having to defend yourself at all. A lot of times that's someone else's decision. So, let's talk trigger squeeze real quick. Just people say trigger squeeze, trigger pull. I say both. I don't care what people say. Some people like to whine about it because they don't have better things to whine about. Good for them. So, what someone said a while back was that you have to conform to the weapon because it won't conform to you, which is completely true. So, when you think about the distance from someone, the meat of their finger to the center of their width here, it's going to be different for different hands, right? Well, the gun thickness is always going to stay the same. The only way you can change this is to change the gun for the most part. So, where people say you always want to use the meat of your finger, that's not true for everybody because people have different widths. I actually have pretty big hands. So, it kind of makes sense for me to jam my finger as far in there as I can, depending on how I'm shooting, or even what gun I'm shooting. My 17L, I do shoot with the meat of my fingertip. My regular 17 Gen 5, my finger goes all the way in there. What you're looking for is for the gun to not move. Moved a little bit there. So, you can try different ways. You can use the tip of your finger. I'll try to demonstrate what you don't want to see with a gun I'm not as familiar with. I'll do it in double action. So I'll use all of my finger and I'll just pull. You see the gun moved a little bit that way. Use the tip of my finger. The gun kind of wiggled back and forth. You try and take that wobble out. You want it smooth. Let's see what I can do with my 17L. It's pretty steady. The last part of this is when you bring your weapon up and you're thinking about your trigger finger and all that. You want to, I like to catch the front sight on my eye as I bring it up. So I'm looking at you. There are 2 points, the target and my eye. And I am just lining up the sights in between those. So the way I do that is not bringing them up like this, because that's not realistic. Instead, pushing the gun forward. And so my eye catches this front sight post, and my eye guides it to the target, which once everything is level, that brings my rear sights into alignment. I don't know if you can see any better with this, but that's how that works. So by guiding it, helps me straighten out the weapon, lines it up with my eye, helps me out a lot. And then the final thing is pull the trigger steady. Excuse me, I mess this up every time. Pull the trigger steady, straight back toward the rear. If people say squeeze, then they want to like move their fingers and thumb and do like weird stuff, like they think squeezing, so I'll squeeze. It's not the worst thing. It's kind of a, I'm nitpicking a little bit, but that is something that I've noticed, that I heard from the same person that told me about weapons not conforming. He gave me these 2 big juicy pieces of knowledge at the range when I was doing an army thing, and I've found those things to be very true. So pull the trigger slow and steady, straight back toward the rear. That's what it is, slow and steady, straight back toward the rear. And it's saying it in your head as you pull kind of makes you think about it. So for your dry fire, you're practicing these things, saying, okay, I'm going to have my weapon ready, it's safe, and then I'm going to draw it and pull the trigger slow and steady, straight back toward the rear. So these are the things you want to practice. You want to get familiar. It seems like a lot of things. I've tried to keep it as simple as I can. So we're doing this 101 video. We'll talk about more exciting, complicated things later, like adding in weapon lights to your practice, things like that. So what are we aiming at? Do you need to set up targets? You can, but honestly what I recommend to get your mind and eyes used to seeing things that aren't just a perfect target that's a bullseye is look at your smoke detector, at a light switch, at a lamp, TV, printer screen. And this is going to help you with your presentations in different areas. Okay, drawer down there. Smoke detector, light, TV. Okay, now let's talk transition. So smoke detector, light switch, back to smoke detector. What I'm doing here is I'm doing 2 things with my eyes. I'm either looking at the target, then I notice another target, so I don't know if you can see my eyes, maybe I'll do it this way. I look up at the other target, oh no, there's something I need to aim at, bring the weapon there, and then, oh, this is nothing, let's go back to that other one. What's over here? So I'm either moving the weapon with my eyes, or my eyes catch something and my weapon catches up. Usually as a rule, I want my weapon looking wherever I'm looking, with the very brief break of, oh no, what's over here? Oh, we need to aim over here now. This is more important than aiming at that. Or, that's definitely nothing. Let's keep scanning. Again, thinking about these scenarios, these what-if scenarios, they help create your protocols, your procedures, and you can build in your redundancies for safety. Because remember that part of safety is stopping a threat. That's part of safety. Aiming at a threat, that's aiming the weapon in a safe direction. So, build in your noticing things, how you move. I recommend at the waist. If you break all this stuff up and re-engage, if you don't need to, then that's going to be a lot more you're worrying about versus simply just pivoting, looking, okay, etc. So, finally, I do this if I'm home alone or, traveling, so I'm in a hotel room and I'm watching TV. I'll get my gun out and, back on the screen. Oh, back on the screen. So, it seems kind of silly, but it's another way to engage yourself, be looking at things that aren't just bullseyes. Also, when you do the TV thing, you don't always know how long the character's on screen that you're aiming at, so you need to get your gun up there ready. Never rush a shot, because that's how you give up on things that are going to matter, like trigger squeeze. You're giving up on your form, kind of like weightlifting. You start giving up on your form, it's going to lead to injuries, it's going to lead to other bad things. Maybe not the amount of gains you could have otherwise. Same thing with a lot of gun stuff. If you start to cut corners, you're going to see that in your end result. So, final thing is, if you work from home, as a lot of people are now more than ever, this is a really great thing. When I used to work from home, I dry fired a lot, and I definitely saw results at the range. Still a decent shot, but I've seen a decrease in my performance since not working from home, therefore handling a firearm as much. But to close this all up, caveats and variables, there's really not, other than ones you're going to be aware of and you're going to consider and think about, and build them into your protocols and procedures. And then, of course, you're going to build that into safety, and you're going to build safety in your protocols and procedures, and back and forth. And with all this practice, you're going to become more confident and familiar with your weapon, such as just taking out a magazine, checking to make sure it's safe, putting the magazine back in, or putting safety on, taking safety off, depending on what kind of gun you have. Single shot, double action, oh gosh, single action, not single shot, single action, double action. Anyway, it's getting late. So, as I've stated many times, it is important to formulate your protocols and procedures, because these things help you stay safe. Again, between not shooting things that you don't want to shoot and shooting things that are maybe asking to be shot, depending on the scenario. Again, I'm not there with you. So, it's also equally important to become familiar and comfortable with your firearm. All these things are going to build confidence, and it's become this beautifully vicious circle of your confidence and efficiency with your weapon. So, and then of course at the end of it all, if you're storing the weapon safe, make sure that the weapon is safe, and then you can put it away or however you do it. And of course, if it's a weapon for defense, then you'll put your loaded magazine in it, rack it back, or you can start with the slide open, put your magazine in. Again, you can watch my video on how pistols, or many pistols, function. So, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned some good information. I hope you learned some good things, rather. Again, it's getting late. If you enjoyed the video, if you like this content, please subscribe. Of course, you can always actually like it as well. And as I mentioned before, support me on Patreon. That's a good way to ensure that we can up our production value a little bit. We are playing with some format things due to that. So, until next time, this has been James Donaldson with The Contemporary Gentleman. Keep your composure.